With that, with the Bush tax cuts too big.
No, I think it was spending, Chuck. And the dirty little secret is, Democrats love to spend, and Republicans do too. It's just that Republicans feel guilty. Look, if you don't have a leader that stands in the breach to restrain the spending of government, they'll always spend.
I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
I appreciate it. We'll catch up, I'm sure, in the next week or so.
Yeah, we will.
Well, come on. The Democratic race, and why it may start getting tougher from here for Bernie Sanders, and of course, Saturday Night Lights. In other words, last night's Republican debate, and what all of those nasty exchanges mean.
You probably are worse than Jeff was.
From engineering and manufacturing.
Campaign. All of the people in the audience, most of them were special interests. They were, it was all set for these people, which is fine. It's fine, but it's truly not appropriate. But the people in the audience were lobbyists and special interest people. I don't have any of those people because I'm putting up my own money. I tell the truth, okay? There were no weapons of mass destruction. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying he went in there, he thought there were weapons of mass destruction, maybe, or maybe he didn't, okay? But he thought there were weapons, and there weren't. So, I'm telling the truth.
But you said he lied. That's a little more than he thought.
If you knew that there weren't weapons of mass destruction, and if you used that as an excuse to go in and try and make up for some sins for previous years, then it would be a lie. But I don't think, maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't true.
Impeached. You wouldn't own that anymore. You would want that in 2008. You thought it should be
Let me say something. The war in Iraq has been a disaster. It started the chain of events that leads now to the migration, maybe the destruction of Europe. He started the war in Iraq. Am I supposed to be a big fan? Now, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, so many lies in there. But the truth is that we started the war in Iraq. We spent $2 trillion on that war. We lost thousands of lives. We have wounded warriors who I love all over the place. It shouldn't have started. We would have been so much better off if Bush and the rest of them went to the beach and didn't do anything. He was a bad guy and all of that. But he made a living off killing terrorists. Now, if you want to become a terrorist, you go to Iraq. That's like the Harvard of terrorism, okay? So, look, it was not a great job. Now, people can say he's popular. I don't know why he's popular. But we also had an economic collapse at the end of his term. That economic collapse gave us Barack Obama. Without that collapse, we wouldn't have had Barack Obama.
Let me ask you about politics now. You had a tough ad hitting Senator Cruz saying he couldn't be trusted. He said you pulled it down, but I just watched it on TV.
No, I pulled it down because I wanted to be nice. I wanted to be a very nice person. And then I saw him do a negative analysis. I said, put it back up. It's a very honorable ad. It's very honest ad. It's just tough. He's a nasty guy. People don't like him. Think of it. You're a United States Senator. You have a lot of friends that are in the Senate. Or in this case, he doesn't have any friends. You don't have one endorsement from one U.S. Senator. These are the people that work with him. How can that be possible?
You also have Christianity. Is that Christianity?
No, I say this. You can't lie and then hold up the Bible, okay? He consistently lies. What he did to Ben Carson was a disgrace. What he did with the voter violation form, which is a fraud, is a disgrace. And you can't do that. You can't hold up all of these values and hold up the Bible and then lie.
Speaking of holding up the Bible, you promised not to use profanity anymore. Did I?
I've always done it just as a way of emphasis and had fun doing it. But running in politics, we can't do it. I mean, I get standing ovations. The other night, I got standing ovations from minor stuff. A lot of times I don't use the word, John. You know, you had it bleeped out. I didn't use the word. I explained that tonight, I hope.
You used to do other words.
Yeah, but not a big deal. You know, Jeb Bush goes on, and he said he's going to rip down his pants and moon everybody on the street. Moon everybody. Nobody writes about it. It's in a couple of papers, but nobody writes about it. That's far worse. He said he's going to rip down his pants and moon everybody? This is a presidential candidate?
Seems like a race to the bottom to me.
No, it's terrible. I think it's terrible, but I didn't say it, he did.
And you won New Hampshire. And now, give me your sense of the campaign right now.
I think we're doing great. I just don't want to have people, you know, do robocalls. Like, as an example, robocalls. This is a crazy business. I mean, you know, I deal with Manhattan real estate. These people are babies compared to the politicians. Robocalls put out, I'm leading by a lot, as you know, and robocalls put out by, we think, Cruz, because it was one of his top people, saying that Donald Trump is not going to be running in South Carolina, vote for Ted Cruz. That's a fraud. So what I have is, because I have a little bit of a microphone out there, what I have is I'm able to explain to people that it's a lie. A lot of people couldn't do it. Ben Carson wasn't able to do that. They hit him very quickly. They took away a lot of votes from Ben Carson.
Your tax returns, when are we going to see them?
I'd say over the next 3-4 months we're working on them very hard, and they'll be very good.
That sounds like they'll come out after potentially the nomination.
Look, I'm the first one to put my financial statement out. I put out a financial statement with no extensions, with no anything. But I have one of the world's most complicated tax returns. It's a massive return, and but I will get it done as soon as I can. Remember this. When I did my financials, which are frankly much more important, when I did my financials, everybody thought it would take a year to put them out. I put them out in 30 days, and everybody was very impressed with it.
The veterans money that you raised, what's the status of that?
We've given away a lot of it. Much of it is given away. Most of it is in the mail. Well, I can tell you, I don't know. You know, a lot of it's just going from the people that made it directly to the veterans group. But much of it is given. I'd say millions have been given out already. I'm very proud of it.
All right, Donald Trump, thank you so much.
Thank you.
CBS News conducted a national overnight poll of Republicans and independents to gauge their reaction to the debate. Respondents thought Marco Rubio was the winner with 32%, Donald Trump was in second with 24%. John Casey came in third with 19% support, Ted Cruz behind him at 12%, Ben Carson at 8%, and Jeb Bush at 5%. And joining us this morning is the winner of that debate, at least according to our poll, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. What was it like on the stage for you? It seemed pretty full.
Yeah. It was an interesting debate. You know, I think it's the smallest stage we've had now, with 6 people in the race, and so there's more time for everyone to speak. And it happened on the night that Justice Scalia left us and passed away, so I thought that added some somber seriousness to the beginning of the debate. And then you get into some of the differences. So it was when Donald and Jeb were going at it a little bit, and Jeb and Donald and Ted a little bit as well. It was a little different from the other debates, I think, and the crowd was pretty involved too.
Yeah, different, because you called Senator
mine. You know, obviously in the last couple of weeks, really visited this very troubling tendency to say things that just aren't true, and just making things up. I mean, just this week alone, he had to pull an ad off the air. He said he didn't tell the truth about my position on sanctuary cities. He's lied about my position on marriage. He's lied about my position on that. And he's not being honest about his previous position on immigration. He tried to portray himself as a very purist, but his record is something very different. And so these things are being exposed now in the campaign, and it's really a troubling trend.
What do you think that means in terms of the presidency, though?
I think it means someone who's willing to say or do anything to win an election, even if it's not true. And that, I think it's going to trouble people deeply. But what I don't want is you can't just make things up. And if you have a campaign that's willing to do like what he did to Ben Carson in Iowa, or what he apparently is doing here now, according to Donald Trump and robocalls, I don't know about that, but Donald mentioned that. I think it speaks to, you know, how you conduct yourself, especially in high intensity situations. So I think it's very troubling, and I hope you'll stop doing it.
You were here on the debate, and Chris Christie wasn't. You guys had quite an exchange in New Hampshire, but what is the fact that you survived to continue and he didn't? What does that mean?
Well, you know, I don't think that. I mean, ultimately, the debate was the reason why Chris is not in the race. Now, I don't have to answer that. I like Chris Christie, and I think he has a future in public service beyond being governor of New Jersey. I don't think we've heard the last of his service. It was a very unusual year, and any other year, Chris Christie would have been a front runner. But this year, we had all these people running, and
it just worked out the way it did. I wish him the best.
What do you think of John Kasich's point last night that the bickering and the back and forth is going to help Hillary Clinton in the end?
So I think ultimately that's true. I remember they had a pretty intense debate the other night between her and Bernie Sanders as well. And let's not forget that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton said some really horrible things about each other during that campaign, and he ended up winning and she ended up working for him. But I would prefer the debates be all about policy. If you watch, I never launched these attacks, but if I'm attacked, I need to respond. I think that was a mistake I made a week ago when I didn't. I should have responded about Chris's record, and instead I pivoted to the issues, and you get pummeled in the media for that. So I don't like it, but unfortunately sometimes you have to do it because people are saying things that just aren't true.
I want to ask you about the replacement to Justice Scalia. What's going to happen there? You think the president says he's going to nominate someone?
He can nominate someone. The Senate's not moving forward on it until after the election. Senator McConnell, the majority leader, has already made that clear, and I agree with that. There's been a precedent established over 80 years that in the last year, especially in the last 11 months, you do not have a lame duck president make a lifetime appointment to the highest court on the land, in the land. So we're going to have an election in November. This vacancy is going to be an issue in this election. The voters are going to get to weigh in, and then they'll choose a new president, and then that new president, which I expect will be me, will then be able to nominate someone and work with the Senate to confirm him.
Don't the voters weigh in when they pick the president in the first place, and then his powers extend until the last day? If there were an emergency, you still expect the president to participate.
But this is a lifetime appointment. This is not a law you can reverse. This is not a policy you can undo. Once you name someone to the Supreme Court, they're going to be there until they die or leave, and that's a very serious thing. And so the president can decide whatever he wants, but I'm just telling you, the Senate's not moving forward on it until we have a new president, and I agree with that.
And if you were president, would you have that kind of last year moratorium on
I would understand, yeah, I would. And in fact, it's not just for the Supreme Court. There's a practice that in the last 8 months of the presidency or 9, you stop doing the appellate courts as well. And I would respect that practice.
If you had if you were president, you had a nominee to put forward, would there be any kind of litmus test? I asked Governor Bush about this last night, because conservatives have said, we want to make sure we have justices who are really conservative.
Well, it's not about your views on the issues. It's very simple. Does this person that we are nominating have a consistent and proven record of interpreting the Constitution as initially meant? What did the society that wrote those words mean? What did those words mean to that society at the time in which those words were written in the Constitution? That's what I want out of a justice that looks at legislation and says, what was the meaning behind this legislation when it was passed by Congress? If you don't like the meaning, then there's a process. The Constitution provides a process to change the Constitution. It's called Article 5, and it gives you a process for changing the Constitution. But I'm looking for people who are going to look at the Constitution and apply it and interpret it based on the original meaning of the words in that document.
Talk about politics a little bit. You did well in Iowa, not less well in New Hampshire. How well do you have to do in South Carolina, and when do you have to put a state in the lead column?
Well, I think that you're going to get into the weeds here on politics early on, but in these early states, it's all proportional. So whether you look at what happened in
Delegates.
Yeah, so you look at what happened in New Hampshire, I finished in 5th, but I had the same number of delegates as the person who finished in 4th and in 3rd. Same in Iowa, I had only one less delegate than the person who finished in 1st. So in these proportional states, we just want to continue to pick up delegates, and we want to do consistently well. Once we get into the winner-take-all states, now the states become much higher. And so for us, I think it's continuing to do well in these early states, get ourselves in a strong delegate position, and then really give ourselves the opportunity to the races and arrows to do real well once it's winner-take-all.
Is it a 1-2 process? In other words, basically best Governor Bush and Governor Kasich so that you can be the alternative, then take on Donald Trump?
Yeah, except that if you look at it, one of the reasons why I'm the candidate that gets attacked by everyone in this race, I mean, I've been attacked by Ted Cruz, I've been attacked by Chris Christie, I've been attacked by Jeb Bush. I get attacked by everybody because I believe our message is one that appeals to voters across the Republican Party. And so I think that's why ultimately I am the only one left in this race that can bring this party together quickly and then grow the conservative movement. So I've never viewed myself in a one-on-one competition with anyone on the debate stage last night. I have a message that I believe appeals to the voters supporting every one of those candidates.
All right, Senator Marco, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in a minute.
Oh, God.
Washington. Dan?
Well, John, news affiliate that stopped in Washington. It's the loss of this larger-than-life figure here at the court and in the law. And I mean, regardless of your ideology, I think it is almost hard to imagine that when the justices return to the...
For a case is always subject to the court's discretion and always depends upon the realities on the ground.
He was a giant in the law. Nominated by President Reagan, Justice Scalia shaped the conservative legal movement with his sharp intellect and his clear, colorful writing, like his dissent calling the court's decision upholding Obamacare pure applesauce. One of his most significant decisions for the court that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual right to bear arms. He told 60 Minutes Leslie Stahl in 2008 he couldn't imagine doing anything else.
When I first came on the court, I thought I would for sure get off as soon as I could, which would have been when I turned 65, because, you know, a justice is retired at full salary. So there's no reason not to leave and go on to something else. I cannot think of what I would do for non-core. I can't think of any other job that I would find as interesting and as satisfying.
But almost immediately after the news of his death broke, the fight began over his successor. The Supreme Court now is divided 4 to...
You're not going to do anything.
About the problem with Washington without talking about a big problem in there. So I think that some of the anger you hear is from being marginalized, and that has come from both liberals and conservatives.
Go ahead, guys. I think the Reverend is right in that, I think this is the problem for Bernie Sanders, is that Bernie Sanders believes at the core, the fundamental inequality that explains America is economic in nature, not racial, not anything else. The problem, he believes, well, I covered it, I talked about economic equality. You heard his response there in Minnesota. That's not enough for some voters. Go ahead.
There was also, in that same event, he was asked about...
Bernie Sanders is a communist. Now what are they going to do?
He's a Mason.
If he's a communist, and they realize that's really what they broke down in the USSR, is communism, and they start declaring it as that. Socialism is one thing, but the Republicans, once they've got their candidate, will start to attack serious, and when they start that, it's going to be dynamite time.
I think that is coming to the surface in this is that we have experienced both in the liberal North and the South hostility. Let's not forget Howard Beach, where Bernie Sanders was born in New York. Howard Beach was in the North. People like me emerged in the North. I never lived in the South. We're dealing with Hollywood, progressive Hollywood, with an Oscar whiteout right now. So I think what a lot of people are beginning to see is, wait a minute, we do not want to be marginalized, and we don't want to be thrown into a situation where specific needs are not met.
What does Bernie Sanders talk about one of the issues where the African community has been marginalized? So instead of talking about the number of times he's been black, what did he talk about the number of African Americans who were in prison under President Clinton? What did he talk about the 10-1?
Yeah, that's not what he's talking. That's not true. Is this a Republican talking? That's baloney. That's baloney.
If you talked about those issues, whether people agree or not, at least they'd be specific issues. The problem is when you talk about President Clinton and the crime bill, Bernie Sanders voted for it. So that might be one reason he doesn't bring it up. But I think that at the other side of that is, Mr. Clinton said he made a mistake. Mr. Sanders ought to say he shouldn't have voted for it, and then we ought to talk about how we deal with mass incarceration, police reform, and all of these issues. I don't think unless we press it, those of us that...
I'm gonna wrap it up here, but Reverend Sharpton, are you gonna endorse before South Carolina?
I don't know. We're meeting with Mrs. Clinton Tuesday.
Okay.
We're talking to Senator Sanders. We may or may not. What I don't want to get caught in is who we're going to endorse. I want to see who's going to endorse us having a fair in this country.
Good point.
Not whose side are we on, who's on our side.
Reverend Sharpton,
That works.
Exactly. I like what he said. So good. Did you ask Madam Secretary? Did you ask her? She said she wants to have a couple? Nope. Where's those raspberries?
I don't know.
She said she bought raspberries and strawberries to make chocolate.
Ask her, oh, there they are.
Strawberry raspberries? She said the strawberries aren't ready. Oh, and I should one. That one looks good. None of the rest of them. And that's how they get the food.
That's all I have.
What?
That's all the strawberries I had last time, too. Bernie Sanders is a Mason, so he's not good.
He's communist. He'll lose. They're gonna say that. You're gonna see stuff happen. Well, maybe perhaps then, but this isn't Russia. They'll go to war. They broke down Russia, turned it into a democracy, and turned it capitalistic. And that's what they'll do.
$36 million, the thing about cancer ads, people are about bucks. That begins, this is going to do Donald Trump because has been proven wrong so many times. What's the point? It's not so much about Trump, it's about the people who are supporting him, who are so angry with the establishment. Why do we assume that they're going to defend the establishment? They're going to defend Bush.
You know what? A way to wait to let the fight between Trump, Cruz, and Bush play out. And then he said, and this is what I believe, and he did it in that a fluid, non-repetitive way that we've come to know that Marco Rubio can do.
Yeah.
And I think in that respect, he did himself a favor. But he usually assured destruction last night, and it was a very nice decision.
It's interesting, look, I think we have Trump, Cruz, 1, 2, and we don't know which order 1, 2 is going to be. Third place matters.
Well, and that's why I thought Jeb was actually as good as he has been, and I thought another last Saturday debate, because Rubio's B+ is better than Jeb's A in debate terms, and I think Rubio was better, did more good for himself. I thought to Glenn's point, how does Marco Rubio wind up being the big figure defending the Bush administration in a fight for Jeb?
I know.
I think that overall, don't you think people just felt like, okay, kids, can you just stop fighting?
Well, and to your point about John Hayes, John Hayes literally said, there's only one little place left for me to go. I can't get into that fight, I'm not going to win it. I'm not going to get rid of the wife, I'm just going to be just a positivity we saw in this morning.
Absolutely.
I love it. My luck.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson in Greenville, South Carolina, where CBS News held a Republican debate last night. We're back now with more from Senator Bernie Sanders on the Democratic race. Senator Sanders, before we get back to the political questions, I want to ask you about the president's replacement for Antonin Scalia. What do you think will happen? He's going to nominate somebody, but Republicans have said they're just going to let it sit.
Well, I'll tell you, it is beyond my comprehension. And it just speaks to the unbelievable level and unprecedented level.
He just finished saying, apparently you haven't been listening, that if it's 9 months before an election, they don't even appoint appellates. So they're not going to appoint a Supreme Court. So apparently this was no coincidence. They're going to let the idiots that are uneducated make fools of themselves, making statements they don't understand. Okay. Ask a question to somebody that doesn't have the answer, and you're going to get a fool's answer, which, that's very common. That's why
the Senate goes forward in as speedy a process as possible, holds the necessary hearings, and hopefully appoints and selects the president, the Supreme Court justice that the president nominates.
What levers, Senator, do the Democrats really have, though? If the Republicans are in the majority and they decide to slow walk this, what do Democrats do? How far could it go?
Well, I think we should do everything that we can, but I think the main leverage that we have is rallying the American people. Look, you could be a conservative, you could be a progressive, but you cannot allow the Republican majority.
I know. Did you hear any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Guess what? They deliberately ask these candidates a question that they're ignorant, and they don't know the answer to it.
The Supreme Court, usually taking the situation to the American people.
Here's what happened. They keep asking Bernie Sanders, what are we going to do about the Supreme Court? Right before he was on, he didn't listen to the other candidates. Here comes George Rubio, and they said he wanted a nice debate. Well, he says, and they were saying on the rest of the show too, that they don't even appoint an appellate judge, let alone a Supreme Court judge, if it's 9 months before a major.
No, they can do it within 22 days.
They never have. And so what's happened is now you begin to think that it was rigged, that Scalia died right before this issue comes to light. They deliberately made fools up and said, oh, he's saying, well, you know, he's terrible and they should appoint somebody right away. They can't. They absolutely never in U.S. history have. They're afraid that maybe somebody's knocking off our justices. They said they never do.
Maybe Bush knocked off 2 of the...
Obviously, that's what everybody's now thinking. So if you didn't watch the show and didn't hear it, they put the Democratic candidate that was in the lead on, and he goes, I think it's, I think it's ridiculous, I think they should appoint somebody. It's like, he's just finished saying, the U.S., based on 200 years of history, which they know everybody will show someone, for an election, because it's job, they just finished saying, you never appoint appellate or Supreme Court, the guys just know, they'll kill a few of them, just to get the judgment that they want in court cases. So, in comes Bernie Sanders and they let him say, oh, I think this is terrible, we should do this. Making an idiot out of him. He doesn't even know he's been rigged. Did you hear what I just said? It is so nasty, Mother. It's so down and dirty, and it's still 9 months before an election, that if they're doing that now, Republicans are doing it themselves. What are they going to do to Bernie or to Hillary? It's going to be miserable. They've already just finished icing Bernie. He's dead. He doesn't even know it. Because basically, yeah, they're suggesting in our country, we're not very nice, and maybe they do knock off the guys that are driving. Who did they knock off? Who did they knock off? If they did that, and they're suggesting that just now, but you have to watch the show to see this, and Bernie doesn't know and he's still talking. Okay, what are you doing? Okay, fine. It got worse. He was the judge that determined Bush got elected and not Gore. Okay, Patricia. By the hanging Chad vote. Okay, but did you know that he died 9 months before the election, and now they're saying they never appoint appellate judges either. And so apparently they're suggesting that's what they'll do. So now it got sinister. And it's like, oh no, this is getting real bad. How bad is it going to get on TV? And guess what? It's over the heads of probably 99% of people. I go to court, all the guys that are attorneys, both sides go, he's brothers and 99% of the public. He's fine. He doesn't want a divorce. I really do want a divorce. And it's like, I'm through with all of them. I'm through with all of them.
Our battleground Trapper Poll and CBS News Elections Director, Anthony. Anthony, tell me, we'll start with the Republicans. We've got Iowa, New Hampshire in the books, heading into South Carolina. What does it look like?
Donald Trump is up here. He is up big. Now, his lead is about the same as it's been, but underneath that lead, the lead of his support has grown. So among his supporters, the ones who say they are not firmly committed to him, is up from last month. And to me, John, this looks like the anatomy of a bump. This is what momentum looks like. You talked to these folks last month, and they said, in order for us to be more firmly with Donald Trump, he has to convince me that he can win. Well, what happened? He won. He won New Hampshire. He won big. So you see that movement, and I think it explains a lot of it. Then you also see that he is up here with a couple of key groups, namely conservatives and evangelicals. In fact, his lead with evangelicals has grown.
I got that shirt right here.
Now, they're not quite as serious as they are in Iowa. They're a little more concerned about terrorism and the economy than faith and religion, as we've learned in Iowa. But that said, those are two key groups. Evangelicals make up a majority of the electorate here, so that underpins his support.
We've been, you and I, talking about for months the durability of Donald Trump's support. It's what allows him to survive every time something happens and people think, well, this will now hurt him. So it sounds like that's really getting more durable. Ted Cruz, let's talk about him for a moment. He's the one trying to make inroads into those groups, evangelicals, conservatives, very conservative. How's he doing after his
They've got the very conservative. That is the one subset of conservatives with which he is up. And that follows the pattern out of Iowa and even some degree out of New Hampshire. So it also, you saw, even in his closing statement last year, he tried to reinforce that. If you want the little conservative, if you want these and check the boxes on what conservatives are looking for. But Donald Trump isn't really competing in that same space. So Donald Trump is competing more as the person who can fix things. So where he's attacking Donald Trump against not having a conservative bonus days, that hasn't quite taken hold yet here.
What about the non-Donald Trump, non-Ted Cruz lane, what some people call the establishment lane, the mainstream candidates? How do they slow?
Well, first of all, we saw a bump for John Kasich. He went from 2% up to 9% here. Among evangelicals, and specifically among the folks who say they would like the next Republican nominee to compromise and negotiate more with Democrats to get things done. Now, of course, the trouble for him is that's a minority here. You know,
this is it.
So there's a limited group out there for Kasich in South Carolina that can work because he needs to do well in South Carolina to get a little momentum. What about Rubio? Where do things stand for him?
Rubio is in third here at 15%. One of the challenges for him coming out of the last debate before last night, and
what they're worried about, like Marco Rubio said, he came in, of course, I know, they're like, Mother, she said it's disproportional, they're just splitting up.
You can probably fill some moments.
Switch to the Democrats, Clinton and Sanders.
delegates vote.
It's still big for
Then they get to
election. I
states
mentioned
where they
the
don't
interview
split the
with
delegates
Bernie Sanders.
vote, so they have
Very
to
clear
totally
that the
take the whole
African American
presidential
vote
candidate.
here is what is underpinning her
And he said, yes,
Now,
yes,
we've got
yes,
some
yes,
electors
yes.
here, and the African American vote will make up a majority of that Democratic
You're,
vote coming up in 2
Jeremy,
weeks.
can I
So
look?
she's up there with them.
Did you have any
Sanders
bacon
up with
around?
white voters. And
Okay,
with that
bacon
vote,
around?
you see most African Americans say that they feel like they know Hillary Clinton very well. But by comparison, very few say but that they know Bernie Sanders very well. So you might see that as a challenge for him because he's got to introduce himself, but you also might see that as an opportunity, as he mentioned in his interview, if he can introduce himself and find some favor.
So are you suggesting her support isn't super durable? He could go and grab some of it if they just knew him better?
I think that that's the challenge for him. You know, his support is based in some of the same things we saw in New Hampshire and in Iowa. He beats Hillary Clinton on the honest and trustworthy question, although here, both candidates are seen as honest and trustworthy. And, you know, he still wins among young voters and he wins among white voters. It's really a question of what the shape of the electorate is here. And as he mentioned in his interview, as we head south in this race, there just aren't that many states that are friendly to him if he keeps the same coalition that he had up in New Hampshire.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back with analysis of last night's debate and the week in politics from our panel. Stay with us.
C-SPAN said that Trump won.
You know, there's this TV show called The Good Wife. And Linda went and got all these operations. I don't want to get into it, but she's recovering. And they were best friends with Jane Fonda and Ted Turner. I don't want to hear about this. Ted Turner is like Trump, who's a billionaire, but he lost everything. And he's a nutcase. Jane Fonda wouldn't stay with him. He wanted to stay together. She says, no, I don't want to stay with you. You're crazy. So she leaves. So then, you've got Trump, and he's on his third wife. Well, anyway. Well, Patricia, I don't want to hear about her. Okay?
She's very gorgeous. Way better looking than Rubio's wife or
Oh, is that right?
Bush's wife.
I haven't noticed that.
Trump's wife is spectacular. She's absolutely the most beautiful woman. He's got great taste. Chuck thinks he's going to win. Chuck really likes him. And he likes his wife. Everybody. He said all the Russian Americans that migrated here in Poland voting for Trump. He said he's big in Las Vegas.
All of Trump's kids are Czechoslovakians but one. So anyway, his daughter, everybody. So, okay. So everybody's Czechoslovakian. So apparently, they're all watching Czechoslovakia.
You're probably related to Trump's family.
Well, he broadcasted from Florida today.
Would you rather have him than the Columbia?
And he said on TV last night, well, you know, my second home is in Florida anyway.
I thought you said he sold it.
Huh?
I thought you said he sold it.
Well, now he's claiming he didn't. What he did was he turned it into something they don't do in Palm Beach, which is they turned it into a club. The Whole house is a club.
So how was he received?
Okay, Mom, here's what's happening. Hillary's going to the stores. Well, there's so many Dinah Shore. Hillary's going herself looks like Dinah Shore, and so is Penny Noonan. There's a reason it's a soda. Now, this is where I went, in the shore. This is so good.
To get us there, and also he was president during 9/11, and he should have made us safer. To me, he was getting into code pink territory. Not Democratic Party territory, not moderate Republican, for kind of code pink territory. I'm not sure how that's going to play. I think we may be hearing a bit about it the next few days. Second thing was, I know many people think that Jeb Bush seems strong in his sparks moments with Donald Trump, but I think too much Jeb Bush falls back on saying he's a 63-year-old man who's constantly saying, don't pick on my mom, don't pick on my pop, my father's the best father. There's something odd and unbecoming about it. We know his parents, we know he loves them, and why that's wonderful. But in fact, Trump was talking about serious issues. I think he should have engaged on that.
Yeah, what's your take?
I agree very much with what you said. I mean, I thought this was a debate for the ages last night, and you must have felt the heat. You must have felt the heat standing a few feet away. It was remarkable, but I think to Peggy's point, Donald Trump is clearly not a pure conservative in any stretch of the imagination, and instead of trying to kind of sugarcoat that in some way that a politician might, he went in the opposite direction last night. In the short term, in this state where he has a very strong lead, it may not hurt him. In the longer term, as his field narrows, it could very well really be a big problem for him. And I also think that the more there was talk about Bush and the Bush family, Peggy said, it is a problem for Jeb Bush because we know even within the Republican Party, for as much affection as there is for the Bush family, there is resistance to more Bushes.
Yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina is going to be the test of whether or not Donald Trump can say or do anything, and if voters just keep supporting him. Because it wasn't just Iraq. I mean, on a lot of different things, on eminent domain, on America's approach to Russia, on Social Security, whether you reform it, all these. He's to the left of a lot of the party, and if they just accept that, I think it means that there isn't really anything he can say or do that will ever turn off his supporters or a portion of the electorate. The other thing I like about last night is that all of this talk and the conversations and the fights, the lie, there was actually a lot of good discussion on policy debates up there about taxes, on entitlements, on foreign policy, and it was good because there were only 6 guys up on the stage, so I think it was a moment for a lot of voters to see a lot more about these candidates than they ever had.
Now, what did you take away from that? I just want to emphasize Peggy's point that this was a real brawl. I grew up as a kid watching a lot of professional wrestling, and it reminded me nothing so much as a cage match between a bunch of very able wrestlers. With that said, it's true that Donald Trump is much more to the left on a number of issues than a mainstream conservative would be. But my hunch is that Donald Trump is not so much speaking to Republican voters as he's speaking to the broader class of American voters. A lot of people agree with Donald Trump about Iraq. A lot of people agree with Donald Trump about President Bush's administration. And I have this hunch that much in the same way that Bernie Sanders is in a lot of ways not that much different from the mainstream Democrat, but he has the appeal of a not Democrat. You can still support President Obama but not have to pull up for a Democrat. I think Donald Trump is a not Republican. For a lot of Americans who may want a change from President Obama but don't want to endorse things like the Iraq War, Donald Trump offers an option. And what happens if Trump does well here? Is that it? Off to the races, it's done. You mentioned it once he gets one on further, but how much of a big thing would it be if he won?
Well, so much depends on how rapidly the rest of the field wins. I mean, as long as you have Kasich, Rubio, and Bush competing and continuing to go on, the more difficult it becomes for anybody to stop him. But, I was talking to Terry Sullivan, who's Rubio's campaign
You don't even know that the big deal in Florida is going to be, you're going to go up to vote and they're not going to let you vote.
Interview this morning.
And they're going to show Florida actually creating an immigration wall. And you're going to know who actually should be out of the state and waiting for his vote. And people are going to have voted in their car, and that is the wall that Trump wants to build. And we're doing it legally, and they're using the mainstream reporters in Tallahassee to do it. And that means those same people that can't vote should be convicted. And that's what, they don't even understand what Florida's going to do with that. And that's planned a month ago.
Justice Scalia's death. So unfortunate, but this is the moment that...
So, that is, controversially on the date. And they're suggesting that the guys use this for 200 years, and they never, ever built those even in appellate level, and state by state, the appellate level, state appellate judge gets not to up to some court case.
This is now, it just shows you all why we're having this debate, why this is so important, and why we've got to win. The question is going to be whether or not the Republicans can unite around it, and you understand.
And they're going to kill it.
Let's switch quickly then to...
That is what's right, is that they're going to not be able to prove.
Oh, yeah, the first thing is, this is an epical moment, you know? In a divided country, more or less, with a divided court, more or less, with the president leaving in 10 months, with a major presidential election coming up, what a moment to have the U.S. Senate consider, and the president consider nominating a replacement for a man who was really a giant, who had so much
who's elected, the last elected Republican president. Now everybody's mad, because they just said it, and now they're going on TV.
This election year, I'm advise and consent 2016. It's going to be so dramatic. I am one of those who thinks I would love to see the president hold off on the nominee. I understand all the facts here. No special year, electing the next president in America.
She's trying to convince the American people this is logical. She's the wrong material. That has nothing to do with it. There's going to be more hits if they don't now do it for a long time.
So now, what do you think about the role that justices have?
Another thing they're suggesting way more an hour ago. This is a law enforcement issue, and they can't stop it. They have no control over it.
To emphasize the stakes of this election, I think this inter-left divide between the two candidates
All of them will deny that they did it.
obscures these terms. There are major fundamental differences between the two parties, and President Obama yesterday said that he fully intends to nominate someone. So I think, Peggy, your dream is going to happen. But my hunch is that whoever the president nominates, is the Republicans may not even consider the nominee, and so we're going to have this 8, 9, 10-month period where I think both Democrats are really going to be hammering on this fact and using it to say, who wins November determines the future of civil rights, of voting rights, of climate, of this vast array of major issues. So I think this might become the determinative issue of the election, and it may redound to Hillary Clinton's benefit, who's making her case on the basis of electability.
And do you think it has a chance to play a role in any of the Senate races? I mean, there are about 5 or 6 Republicans in blue states, senators who are up in blue states. Do you think this matters in those states, and therefore might matter to which party controls the Senate?
I think it very well could. I mean, we have seen really since Bush v. Gore the notion that the Supreme Court is not necessarily an impartial arbiter of American society. The court has been politicized, and I think even more so as a result of the death of Justice Scalia. I think we are headed toward a major debate about the role of the court.
You died because of the death of Scalia.
Control.
He died yesterday.
The power of the
Inspector came back and he dropped the
Supreme Court. I think it's a big not just...
He went quail hunting.
To add to that point, I think depending on how the fifth shapes out, that means that the 2014 election has been hugely momentous, right?
They were taking a lot here to the Supreme
a very comfortable majority, and if Democrats can't make that up this year.
And apparently, when you have a guy that's returned who became president of the country, on the Supreme Court, and has the greatest influence in everything bad, now the rest of the people are
I mean, everyone said he doesn't have a chance down here, but he
sounds like a stupid kind of Democrat
to get the minority down here. And he's actually, as was mentioned earlier,
accomplished it. He's electable. He'll be worth millions of dollars in a few years.
It's his opportunity to go that path.
You've been on the ground here doing some reporting. What do you think?
I think that
at least in this kind of rough area, that people are undecided, that precisely because Bernie Sanders is unknown, and because
You know, the right is so darn scared, and this is the Republican, this is what happened. And that's, you know what, that's it's coming down, because they're not represented as a Democrat. So now they're there. Okay, so now
I know that the Sanders campaign has hired staffers. I think this could be very much underlooked.
Under Ross Perot, because I was put in
throughout the South.
GM computer division, the whole division, they only had one female, well, here's the name. And Ross Perot came in.
Hillary Clinton.
And then the president of IBM was first. And I kept heading into Dallas for Ross Perot Jr. And he was on the debate. Just like the guy who was murdered from IBM when I'm working in Florida, and the third person to work history, IBM's connected. Took the information to Ford GM, and they bought and one had configuration from the Navy. On my friends that are aerospace engineers, rocket scientists.
Like a victor.
Because they're like,
I'm sure she'll work it really hard. And this is important. I think South Carolina is where Mrs. Clinton tries to stop Bernie Sanders' momentum.
In the last 45 seconds, Dan, how nervous are they in the Clinton camp? There's Democrat, and then there's, you know, more placid. Where is
I talked to 4 governors on Friday who support Hillary Clinton for president, and I was actually surprised to the degree to which they still see her on a path to win the nomination. They know that she is, you know, got beaten badly in New Hampshire. They know that the Sanders message has taken hold. They know that she has to make some course corrections, but they also believe that as we move farther into the calendar, it's going to be advantageous for her. I don't know whether they're being optimistic because they feel they need to be,
to the guy that pivoted George Bush to office.
Thanks to all of you for joining us here, and thanks to you, all of you out there.
Same hotel?
Okay, so there's a threat. I don't understand. See, you don't understand what happened. I do too. Jeb Bush would never have gotten into Florida office. His dad was director of the CIA. His job is to go kill presidents of countries around the world because he was the head of the CIA. So Jeb Bush gets in because Lawton Child's dead. Same way. What happened? He's found dead in the morning in his home. Well, I'm sorry, but he's a Supreme Court justice. He has high security around him at all times. So does the governor of Florida. That's a hit. Those are hits. So those 2 guys, it's all about Florida.
Patricia, will you I can hear you too much.
Okay, fine. So, they're taking the ones to think about it, threatening them. Basically, you can't talk, because if you do, and you start to say, well, this is really what happened. What they're showing is just an ad on TV. Those people are just, you know, and honestly, Peggy Noonan, she's going, well, let's not select the Supreme Court justice now. They just finished before her. She's trying to convince the American people to just do it out of their goodness. I don't even want to get into it. The blacks are scared. The black grandmas and great grandmas, the females want that because they know that they got as far as they could. Next generations are never going to have money again. The blacks that's as far as they're ever going to go. Trump said on TV Obama only got in because of, and he said something last night. Because the economy tanked. He said so they put a black in because they didn't trust any of them. Sarah Palin got elected governor because there was so much greed and money, corruption in politics. They didn't trust any politicians in Alaska. So she was not part of any of that. Never could take kickbacks or bribes. She's too dumb. So they elect the dumb one, just like her. They figure he's too dumb, he's on the outside, so they elect the outside dumb one. Always. That's a Democrat, when they're scared. So they're pulling that off right now. They're getting everybody psyched and scared. Now I don't understand why they do this. Look at it, took them out. The last hour and a half. Okay, that's it. There is no more shows now. I don't even know. Oh, that's a bridge. Look at that. the beginning states where they were selecting delegates are called proportional. That's what they explained. They said, no, when they get to Florida, they take everything, and that's how they win the whole country. They're claiming that Florida's got so much diversity that whatever and apparently there's so much money behind that diversity, that whatever we say down here, the whole country just is okay, they know what they're talking about. They've seen everybody with money, blacks and whites, so they all vote according to Florida, and the whole country snowballs and just lets them in. That's what they think, and that's why they think George Bush Jr. got in. But they didn't. Scalia was on the Supreme Court, and they said he was the deciding vote and the opinion that a Republican should be president of the United States. And then they made sure that he was dead 9 months before the election. He just dropped dead yesterday. And they go, and I go, well, what happened? Same as Martin Childs. They found him in the morning. What do you mean they found him in the morning? He's under high security at all times. What do you mean they found him? They let him. In other words, if you have a heart attack, they let you drop dead. And that's legal. It's legal to use a taser, and if you get them to the hospital within 5 minutes, you can use a taser on people in Florida, because we sold the first triple tasers in the state. Right after that, within the next 3 years, there were guys that were tasers that died of a heart attack on the other side of the state. Well, now you don't hear about tasers used at all. But you don't even call them, because they have the ability to take the whole room down. And it's like, if they can't comprehend and you're all arguing, and they can't figure out what you just said, they take down the whole room. Go to jail, and then they figure it out. But if they taser some of these people,